Welcome to the meeting of the Multilingualism Research Hub. There are fewer of us than previously, but let's hope that, yeah, there's no free coffee today, but let's hope there'll be some free knowledge and free free sharing of the know-how. I hope everybody can hear me and can see me. Sorry for being late a little bit, but we've been trying to use the external camera, and it turned out that although we can see everything, we couldn't hear anything. So you couldn't hear anything. That's why we had to change. We had to. Yes, it's a success. You can see the slide. So let's move on. Okay, guys. So this is the presentation of our Experimental Linguistics Lab from the Faculty of Modern Languages, Institute of English Studies. Okay, and if you want to learn more about our lab, you can of course click on the right link on our Multilingualism Research Hub website. Okay, so who are we? Okay, this is us. This is us as you can see, right? It's the lab, right? Yeah, and what we do, in several different things. Okay, so from theoretical linguistics to applied linguistics to psychology, and our distinctive feature is that we're trying to collaborate on some interdisciplinary research, right? Okay, so what does that mean? Okay, well, it means that this research is kind of, you know, on the crossroads between linguistics and psycholinguistics, that we run some large cross-sectional studies trying to find out certain patterns in how language acquisition works, that we also run classroom quasi-experiments because we're very strongly rooted in classroom research or classroom-oriented research, okay, and we also run linguistic, psycholinguistic experiments through experiments that can be designed and conducted in laboratories. What is another distinctive feature is that we are trying to be as close to the real classroom tasks or real life situations as possible, because very often linguistic and psycholinguistic research can be really detached from reality, and we are trying to be as close as possible to the reality. And we also believe that, you know, participants' motivation is a very valid factor in the studies. That's why we're trying to entertain our participants with what we do, rather than boring them to death with very, very sophisticated tasks, right? So this is it. Okay, so our interdisciplinary research is, well, these are the points, right? So there is childhood bilingualism research in collaboration with Eva Hammond's lab that we are going to hear about in April, right? Okay, there is bilingual education research, so content and language integrated learning, affective cognitive factors in bilingualism research. There's research on academic vocabulary assessment and acquisition, and there's research on L2, so second language and third language vocabulary acquisition and grammar acquisition. And what is really important to us is that we are really trying to be as ecologically valid as possible. We're always trying also to be methodologically rigorous, okay? Because very often, you know, ecological validity doesn't go really in pair with methodological rigor, but we're trying to merge the two. And we also have a strong focus on individual learner differences, which means that we are not trying to treat people as, you know, block-like fashion, but very often we're trying to grasp certain differences between our participants. And this is all because we're not only, and this is a very distinctive feature of our lab, we're not only researchers, but we're also language teachers. Okay, and that's why we're really careful for those features of our research. And today, because it's absolutely impossible to focus on everything, today we'll focus just on the acquisition of vocabulary and grammar in the second and third language. Okay, and this presentation will be divided into two parts. I will do the first part on vocabulary acquisition, and Małgosia Foryś-Nogala, who's sitting beside me, next to me, right, in the corner somewhere there, right? Okay, is going to talk about grammar oriented research, right, on second and third language. Okay, and I already want to apologize that those who have seen my ISB presentation will recognize some of the slides, but I decided that it's a good introduction to showing what we are doing right now. Okay, so part of it might be known to some people, but I was trying to make it brief and as essential as possible. Okay, so if you think about second and third vocabulary acquisition, okay, so the areas which are important in this type of research, the areas which are important for us definitely, will be cross-linguistic similarity. So how languages are similar, in to what extent they are similar, and the effects of those similarities on learning. The effect of cross-linguistic influences, so let's say the old terms, language transfer, and their effects on learning, okay, and the role of language awareness, right? So how much the learner knows in terms of individual differences, how much the learner knows, and whether that will kind of benefit them in taking advantage of cross-linguistic factors. Okay, so a very old quote that I like to start from, okay, a very old one, right, from the 1950s, okay, that those elements that are similar to the learner's native language will be simple for him, and those elements that are different will be difficult. Okay, so a lot of our research actually is based on this simple quote, which is, we know that there is much more into language acquisition than just simple similarity, and we know that Robert Leider was a structuralist, and he had his very strong opinions about languages, but basically what he said is true to quite a lot of extent, and we can actually show that in the research. Okay, so my presentation, as I said, will be about words, so lexical cross-linguistic similarity, and I will just very briefly present what types of words I mean, right? So words which are formally very similar, or words that can also be similar semantically, right? Because formal similarity doesn't always entail semantic similarity. Okay, and those words language learners, not third language learners for a moment. Okay, well, those learners will encounter three types of words. So cognates, where the form and the meaning are very similar. False cognates, where the form is very similar but the meaning is different, like so lectura and lecture do not mean the same, right? And non-cognates, where the meaning is similar but the form is completely different. Okay, and our main focus is cognates, to a certain extent also false cognates, but this presentation will be about cognates mainly. Okay, and the assumption is that they can be found across a lot of languages. Okay, not necessarily due to stemming from the same language family, but also thanks to borrowing, thanks to coinage. There will be lots and lots and lots of words which are similar across the different languages. Those words, cognates and false cognates, thanks to their cross-linguistic similarity, have become objects in psycholinguistics, objects of study in psycholinguistics and second language acquisition. Because we are on the crosswords of those two, we will be looking at them from those two perspectives. Okay, so a very brief introduction now. So in psycholinguistics, cognates have a lot of advantages. Okay, they will be remembered better, they will be better learned incidentally, more resistant to forgetting, they will be translated faster and more accurately, they will yield faster lexical decisions. So if you have to click a button deciding if what you see is a word or not a word in a certain language, you will do it faster for cognates than for the other non-cognate words. Okay, so generally something which is called the cognate facilitation effect. Okay, and it has been shown in a lot of research on second language acquisition and second language processing. Okay, now the problem is that psycholinguistic research will have lots of limitations. First of all, lack of ecological validity, right? So it's done in laboratory settings, very often the words learned will be, the subsets of words will be very small, like 10 words chosen for learning, for instance. Okay, and very often they will also be pseudo words, which are completely different from the kind of real life words. Okay, some of the tasks will be completely artificial, so they may not really show how words are required. Okay, and the cognitive facilitation has been shown in very highly proficient participants in very many cases, right? So generally there are problems with ecological validity and ecological conditions. Okay, on the other hand, in SLA research, there is a very funny thing, right? That there is an assumption that learners don't actually benefit from cognates, right? So cognates may be an excellent resource for guessing and remembering, accept cognates as equivalent. Okay, or the actual similarity or dissimilarity of forms and meanings is one factor, but the judgment of each individual learner matters as much. Okay, so what the learner decides, okay, is more important than what the learner's brain does, right? Okay, so and there is an assumption that learners cannot benefit from this similarity, right? Of cognateness, right, which is a far echo of Schmidt's noticing hypothesis, okay, whereby the learner is supposed to notice the input that he or she is presented with. Okay, so according to Schmidt, this awareness can be done at the level of, can be raised or can be present at the level of noticing and the level of understanding, and the level of noticing is just the conscious registration of form. I register, I know this form exists, right? So I can kind of benefit from it because there is no learning when you are unconscious. Okay, and the level of understanding of awareness, that will be recognition of meaning, rule, pattern, so that you have some kind of meta awareness or meta knowledge of that. Okay, so cognate awareness, which is also very often taught, okay, in different types of studies, will be like the perception or knowledge. Okay, we don't know which one. Okay, because this definition is very vague. Okay, perception or knowledge that helps individuals recognize the relationship between an unfamiliar word in one language and a familiar word in another, and thus understand the meaning of the unfamiliar word. Which type of awareness this is, noticing or understanding, or maybe both, this is rather unclear, because this definition of cognitive awareness that is raised in many studies is rather vague. Okay, but generally studies carried out previously have shown that the learners are not aware that cognates exist, that they fail to identify cognates in text. When you ask learners to underline cognates, they cannot do that. They don't believe in cognateness. Okay, they believe in false friends. Okay, and so generally they show lack of awareness. If you ask learners, they show lack of awareness. Okay, which awareness, again, difficult to tell. Okay, so also second language acquisition research, which is much more down to earth and much more in the classroom, right, has problems. Okay, because of this kind of focus on the meta awareness and very strong and verified assumption that you have to raise awareness in order to benefit. Okay, so it's really unclear if this awareness matters. Okay, and very often it has methodological flaws. So words for the study will be chosen at random, just as opposed to psycholinguistic research, when they are really meticulously matched, chosen, and so on, right? There will be huge flaws in research design. If you look at the studies carried out in the 1980s, 1990s, there will be real flaws in how some of those studies were carried out. So learners would not be tested individually, by groups, for instance, right? So a group of learners will be asked to pinpoint some cognates in text, for instance, right? So generally they lack methodological rigor. Okay, and this is our assumption. Okay, this is our assumption, and this is the starting point for our research. Okay, so generally we assume that what we need is find out if this cognate awareness is necessary to acquire cognate words. Okay, but we have to test it in various conditions. In classroom settings, because we are not only researchers but also teachers. Okay, we have to check if this matters if we present learners and they with words in texts, okay, and whether they can acquire them incidentally. We want to check that in second language context, but also in the third language context. Okay, so because we know that we don't often just, you know, finish at the second language, right? So, and what we also need is a lot of methodological rigor. Okay, so not only ecological validity, but also methodological rigor in the studies, and also good operationalization of what we mean by this kind of awareness. Okay, and right now, after this introduction, I'm going to show you two studies on second language acquisition, and I'm going to pass on to third language acquisition, so that you know more or less what is happening in the lab right now. Okay, so the first two studies, one of them is our classroom learning of cognates, false cognates and non-cognates, and the second one will be incidental learning of those words through reading. Okay. In both studies, we try to manipulate awareness of the participants, okay, and we try to manipulate this awareness at the level of understanding, right? So we made people aware that there are certain rules, that there are certain types of words, okay, right? So we informed about cognateness, we trained strategic knowledge on cognates and false cognates that you can just benefit from that, okay? We trained vocabulary learning strategies focused on cognateness, okay? But we didn't focus them on the form of the words to be taught, okay? So there was no, like, you know, look, this word is a cognate and you have to learn it, right? So we didn't do that. We just assumed that we will raise this awareness on a different set of words, okay? Right, so those words to be learned were never highlighted in that specific way, okay, right? They were never kind of shown to be cognate or false cognate. Okay, so our stimuli came in both those studies. The stimuli were 90 words, 90 words, 30 cognates, 30 false cognates, 30 non-cognates, okay? They were only nouns, okay, because we decided to kind of restrict ourselves to nouns in those two studies, okay? You can only see some examples of those, of course, and we really tried to methodologically rigorously control for their second language frequency, for their concreteness. So we had an equal number of abstract and concrete words. They were also controlled for that. And in the case of cognates and false cognates, we also controlled for the orthographic overlap in terms of so-called Levenstein distance. Okay, and why is that important to control for the Levenstein distance? Well, okay, so what's this Levenstein distance thing? Okay, it's like a metric, okay, that can be used to measure how close orthographically are some pairs of words. Okay, so for instance, in the case of sport, the Levenstein distance is 0. Right here is the normalized distance because we also take care of how long the word is. Okay, it's 0 for strategy and strategia. It will be slightly larger, but for explosion and explosia, it will be even larger than that. Okay, basically Levenstein distance calculates how many letters have to be inserted, deleted, or changed in order to rewrite one word onto another. Okay, one string of letters onto another. And why is it important? Okay, well, in the case of cognates, it's all important. In the case of false cognates, the results are kind of mixed. Okay, I just want to show you the result from one of the studies, just briefly flash it at you. Okay, so in that study, we had learners of different proficiencies. Okay, so and letters of different proficiencies and words of different Levenstein distances. Okay, so the thing is that, okay, here you have at the bottom on the x-axis, you can see the growing Levenstein distance, and here you can see the probability of translation. This line, the solid line, is high proficiency learners. The dotted line is low proficiency learners. As you can see, low proficiency learners are just equally bad in translating false cognates of different types of, you know, Levenstein distance. Okay, and high proficiency learners are just better. Okay, so and that's it. Okay, but if you look at cognates, the pattern is completely different. Okay, it turns out that, again, this is the growing Levenstein distance, so the less similar words. Here you have the probability of correct translation. For high proficiency learners, it doesn't matter. Okay, but for low proficiency learners, it turns out that, you know, the less similar, the worse is their translation. Okay, so they don't actually see the similarity, kind of, right? Okay, so they make a lot of mistakes, or they even stop translating the words because they don't recognize them as similar. Okay, so this is important. Okay, so this is the classroom study. Okay, so this is what we did in the study. So that was a digression about Levenstein distance, and now this is the study. So we went as ecological as possible. Okay, we approached real teachers, regular lessons. Actually, that was a school opposite our institute, right? So yeah, so we had a longitudinal design, words were embedded in real ELT activities, right? So it was, you know, the essence of classroom teaching. That was our general question, overarching question. Okay, whether learners need to consciously identify words in order to advantage from them. We examined over 100 participants. Well, actually, we examined more than that, but we had to throw away some of our data. Okay, I will tell you why in a moment. Okay, so in this study, you'll see 8 different groups, lower intermediate level, all using the same course book. We had a lot of control measures. I'm not going into them. Okay, so proficiency measures, different types of awareness measures that we used. Okay, what is important, we tried to go as ecologically valid as possible. So we divided those words into semantic categories like crime, society, art. Okay, and we created exercises based on, so topic-based exercises. Okay, well, normal exercises. Okay, so exercises for grouping, exercises for gap filling, some crosswords, some you know, some tables. We were generally good at creating exercises because we are teachers, right? And also textbook authors. Essentially, each word was introduced within one lesson and revised within another. Okay, and the exposure to the words was kept to the minimum, like 2 and up to 3 encounters of the word and in total. And that's why we had to throw away some of the data, because one teacher decided that she would just push the learners towards learning the words better, and she exposed them to those words like 7 times or 8 times because they couldn't learn those false cognates, right? For instance, right? So they had to. That data had to be discarded, right? Okay, so the method, well, children received booklets with those ELT words, rather teachers received booklets. Okay, the teaching was incorporated into regular classes. The words were introduced via those booklets for a period of 6 weeks. There was a pre-test and post-test, and those were quasi experiments, okay, because we couldn't kind of disentangle the classes, so there was no random assignment to the groups, right? So they were quasi experimental studies. Each time we had 2 teachers. Each teacher was teaching 2 regular groups, and right. So for each teacher, one group was randomly assigned to the experimental or to the control conditions. Okay. And in the experimental group, so both groups received some training of vocabulary learning strategies, right? Because we wanted to give something to the kids, right? So they received free training on vocabulary learning strategies. Very nice, very interactive lessons. Okay, but only in the experimental groups we raised awareness of cognateness during that training. Okay, quite importantly, it was a double-blind experiment because the children believed that it was just a crazy lady doing a project on, you know, how to better learn words. Okay, and the teachers didn't know which group is which, because those awareness raising workshops were carried out in their absence. Okay, so I was alone in class. Okay, so the teachers didn't know which group was which. Okay, so in the first workshop, Okay, in the first experiment, we had only one workshop, just brief introduction, brief raising awareness of cognates. So we had the pre-test, we had the post-test, we had the training, and there was this one workshop. Okay, already in the pre-test, as you can see, cognates were known better than the other words. Okay, and luckily all words benefited from the classroom instruction, which is great. Okay, right, so they did learn something, but there was absolutely no advantage of cognates in classroom learning. Okay, nothing of that sort. Okay, and also the awareness manipulation didn't work whatsoever. Okay, nothing worked. Okay. We also used a task that was typical for SLA studies. So we asked the children at the end to recognize some cognates in text. Okay, we just bombarded them with cognates. Maybe that's a bad word. Okay, at the moment. Okay, but we exposed them to a text with a lot of cognates. Okay, of course they were not highlighted, right? But you can see them. Nothing, no effect of manipulation on notice, on reading comprehension, on cognate noticing cognates of higher Levenstein. This is nothing, no effect of cognate noticing on learning, nothing. Okay, so there was nothing that worked apart from the fact that the children learned the words. Okay, but we manipulated the awareness just once. Okay, so now let's do it better. Okay, hence the second experiment. So the first batch was like 50 children, the second batch was another 50 children, but the second batch received 4 workshops, 4 fantastic interactive workshops raising the awareness of cognates. Okay, so basically the design was the same, but they got those 4 workshops. Okay, so and what happened? Nothing. Right, yeah, so everything was really very similar. So they received like 60 minutes of cognate learning strategies on cognates and false cognates, and nothing worked. Okay, still cognates were known better, right? All words benefited. Okay, learners in the experimental group learned cognates, it seems that at the expense of other words. Okay, so we raised the awareness of cognates and they kind of focused on those cognates so much that they didn't learn the other words quite well. Okay, the awareness raising worked to some extent because they were slightly better at recognizing those words in the text. Okay, but apart from that, nothing. Okay, it just didn't matter. Okay, all right, then. Sorry, we used should be called study 2, not study 3 here. Okay, so the next study was incidental learning of cognates, false cognates, and non-cognates through reading. That was another task that we did. This is still unpublished. Same words. Okay, this time we embedded them in short stories. Okay, and those stories were constructed in a very specific way. Okay, the words will occur from 1 to 4 times in the text, from 2 to 10 occurrences in total. Okay, and for we created completely random sets out of those words. You can see set 25 here. Like, so fascination was used once, profile twice, producer 4 times, prospect once, catalog 4 times, and sculpture once. Okay, so completely randomly assigned to certain sets, and then we asked our MA students and PhD students to create texts, okay, which were then checked by the native speaker and so on. Okay, very strict criteria for text creation. So all the other words had to be kept within the most frequent English words. There were no fixed phrases. We checked for that. No idioms, nothing. Okay, target words were no more than 5% of all words in a story, because there is research showing that you cannot benefit from reading, from learning from reading if the target words, unknown words, constitute more than 5%. They were always separated by some sentences used in this same sense across all stories. It took us 2 years to prepare those stories, basically, to cut the long story short. Okay, well, you can see a story. I'm just going to flash it at you. Okay, a story, okay, created based on that random set. Okay, we had 45 of those stories. Okay, right? I mean, they were readable, they were interesting, as our piloting has shown, right? So in this procedure, we had 67 participants, Polish participants, chosen out of 135 screened. Okay, they were more or less at B2 level. Okay, they were randomly divided into experimental and control groups. And let me just tell you a little bit more about the whole procedure. Okay, so first we had the online screening to sieve out, let's say, Ukrainians who wanted to take part, because we wanted Polish participants. We also wanted to sieve out those at lower levels, those at higher levels, and so on. So they did some initial testing. And importantly, they always came to the lab on Friday. Friday, that was the important thing. Okay, and they did the pre-test on Friday, so that we had Saturday and Sunday for the screening. Okay, so we just chose those who were kind of who fit the profile that we wanted, and we also hoped that over the weekend they will forget some of the words, because in the pre-test we also had to pre-test the key words, right? They were hidden among a lot of other words and hidden among other tasks, but we had those hopes, because it was, after all, incidental learning. Okay, then always Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday they read the stories, so 15 stories each day plus comprehension questions to check understanding. Okay, and on Thursday we did the post-test. Okay. Right, so the overarching question was, again, whether they would benefit. Okay, and we manipulated a word that all participants, before reading the stories, had to go through some reading strategy slides, okay, and vocabulary learning strategy slides. And of course, in the control group, they did some dummy training, and in the experimental group, they had their awareness raised by focusing on different types of words, okay, and exploiting cognateness and post-cognateness. Okay, did it work? Okay, it's a rhetorical question, of course, right? Well, you can see that it didn't work, because the experimental group actually did worse than the control group. Okay. Yeah, if you look here, the experimental group is the dotted lines, okay, and the control group is the solid lines, okay. It seems that awareness training actually hampered learning the words, okay, even when statistically controlling for working memory, knowledge of story words, proficiency level, okay. So this is what we learned from this very elaborate and very ecologically valid study. Okay, we are still struggling with writing the paper out of it. Okay, right. So this is what we learned. Okay, that raising awareness seemed to hamper learning other words. Okay, so what's the take-home message from those two studies? Well, the take-home message is that, okay, that was the first question and the answer was no. That was the second question, the answer was no. Okay, so generally raising awareness didn't actually change much in our studies. Okay, so if you want to have a look, these are our papers on learning second language cognate words and false cognate words. Okay, they're listed here. Okay, they were all funded by the NCN grant. Okay, and okay, so we decided that future research on raising cognitive awareness should focus on maybe some other languages, maybe words other than nouns, because we only had nouns here. Okay, language production, language comprehension, and also languages beyond the second one. So different types of similarity, because then you will of course have if you go for more languages, you will have different types of similarity. Okay, so similarity across the first and the third language, but maybe across the second and the third language, or maybe across 3 languages. Okay, and yes, exactly, this is what we're doing right now. Okay, this is our next grant. Okay, so we are focusing on different types of languages and different types of similarity, right? So this is what we're doing right now in our next NCN funded grant. Okay, And we are focusing on 3 different languages: Polish, which is a Slavic language; English, which is a Germanic language; and Italian, which is the 3rd language, which is Romance. Okay, why? Well, because in this way we can avoid accidental similarity, but we can really control and manipulate the cross-linguistic similarity of what we really want to check. Okay, so we focus on Polish learners of English as L2 and Italian as L3. Okay, and we, of course, I'm preaching to the choir right now because we all know that. Okay, but that, you know, 3rd language acquisition is not only about adding another language. It's a lot of dynamic interactions and cross-linguistic influence. Okay, which is the influence of a person's knowledge of one language on the person's knowledge of another language. Okay, and this cross-linguistic influence will be affected by quite a lot of factors, like proficiency in the languages, cross-linguistic similarity and language typology, language status, native versus non-native languages, okay, and some meta-awareness once again. Okay, so I will just briefly wish through those factors. Okay, so proficiency both in you know, the source language. Okay, maybe the language is known better will have more impact. Also the target language, maybe the better you know the language, the more cross-linguistic influence there might be, or maybe it's the other way around. Okay, maybe it's more likely to occur at the beginning. Okay, probably if languages are more similar, there will be more cross-linguistic similarity, but there will also be like a hierarchy of cues playing a role. So the learner will notice certain cues, but might not necessarily notice some other, like similar vocabulary will be noticed faster than similar grammar. Okay, there is some research showing that maybe the 2nd and the 3rd language will be cognitively more similar. Okay, because they are learned rather than acquired in the childhood. And finally, that, you know, this capacity to reflect, manipulate knowledge might matter. Okay, a key question in 3rd language acquisition is, you know, which languages will matter in this acquisition. Okay, so is it just one language or more than one language? Okay, so that's one of the languages act as the primary source of cross-linguistic influence with the role of similarity, or maybe both languages. Okay, so is this like wholesale or just property or by property type of transfer? We don't know that. Okay, but the problem is that most cross-linguistic similarity models, cross-linguistic influence models, were created proposed for syntax. Okay, so basically there is nothing about vocabulary. Okay, so we are kind of pioneering here in trying to find out the role of cross-linguistic influence and similarity in the area of vocabulary. So we are trying to check if the effect of this cumulative similarity, like across 3 languages, will be different from the effect of just double similarity in acquiring 3rd language words. Okay, yeah, and we are trying to focus on the acquisition of 2nd and 3rd language cognates. Okay, and I will just skip this a little bit, okay, and just move on because Małgosia has a lot to say about grammar. Yeah, okay, right. So the question is, you know, how to measure the amount of cross-linguistic influence in 3rd language lexical acquisition. Okay, and this is what we arrived at, that basically there are no tools to examine 3 languages at one go. Okay, and we decided that we might have to adapt some of the existing tools for the purpose of our pioneering study, and that's what we did. Okay, we used a tool that is well known in 2nd language acquisition, the vocabulary knowledge scale, and we tried to use it for 3 different languages. Okay, with overarching questions about the, you know, the how does cross-linguistic similarity modulate the knowledge of L3 Italian words, okay, which are of different types. okay? And what's the impact of individual differences on the knowledge of those words, okay? So individual differences such as proficiency levels, language learning aptitude, working memory of the participants. And the instruments that we are using, okay, of course, we control for proficiency, we control for working memory, we control for language learning aptitude, okay, and we use a tool that is adapted, okay, but it's not ideal, but we're doing our best, okay? So the VKS generally is like a scale, okay? It's quite a reliable tool. There's a lot of research on that. There's a lot of discussion about the VKS, but generally it consists of some items tapping into the stages of vocabulary knowledge, okay? So for instance, the learner has to see the word beautiful, right? And has to decide how well the learner knows this word, okay? So I don't remember, I've seen this word, I think it means, I know this word it means, and I can produce a sentence, okay? Now, the problem is that this VKS will only be working with the second language, okay? So, and we need to account for the first language, for the second language, and elicit information in the third language, okay? So we want to use cross-linguistic influences from the different languages in eliciting L3 knowledge, okay? So basically, we decided that it will be about choosing the languages of word presentation and choosing the languages of instructions, okay? So, you know, if you can present the target word in English or in Polish, in our case, okay? You can present the instructions, so those sentences, in English or in Polish, okay? And actually, you can arrive at 4 different versions in this way, okay? So that was our first study, okay? Which version to choose, okay? Which language version to choose? It was like a Latin square design. So which version to choose? Well, finally, we decided on the presentation of the word in English to kind of activate English, and the instructions in Polish to activate Polish, and they had to produce the word in Italian, right? And that was piloted on over 120 participants from the University of Warsaw. That was our study done in the times of the pandemic, mostly online, right? And I'm finishing right now. Okay, so what types of stimuli do we use? I will not tell you about the results. I will just tell you what we're doing. Okay, different types of cognates, which are triple cognates. Okay, we are using double cognates, so only between the second and the third language, and of course non-cognates. Okay, of course they are controlled for everything that we know that should be controlled for. Okay, we're also using English non-words to control for guessing, because participants love guessing. Okay, as we know, and we have some hypotheses that triple cognates should be known better than double cognates and non-cognates, that double cognates should be known better than non-cognates. I mean, these are just commonsensical hypotheses, okay? And that learners of higher proficiency in English should benefit more from cognates. I will not tell you the results, okay? I'm just finishing, I'm telling you right now, okay? I don't know why, but on Zoom, I'm completely pink. Yeah, purple. Well, suits me. I think it suits me. Okay, right. So we have 3 tracks. Okay, and track 1 is a huge correlational study on third language knowledge, okay, and individual differences in language learning and processing. We already examined nearly 100 participants. Again, a study during the pandemic, we've managed to do that, and I'm very, very happy, right? And we have just finished a classroom quasi-experiment where 40 participants divided into experimental and control groups acquired L3 Italian words just from scratch. They were beginners in Italian, okay? And again, similarly to the classroom study that you saw, we created materials and they were followed throughout the semester when acquiring that the vocabulary knowledge. And finally, track 3 is a laboratory experiment which is planned and is coming soon.